Normative ethics. What is it? In this video, we'll go over normative ethics. I'm also going to give you examples of normative ethical theories and a few ways that they are the same and different. Let's get started. Normative ethics, you are literally looking at the norms, what it would be normal to do, the standard, the criteria for your action to be ethical, or in other words, for ethical actions. And this is a big question. What are the standards? Or if there's just one, then what is the standard for acting in a way that is ethical, permissible, righteous? And that's when you get different theories. In normative ethics, you're studying the different theories that each tell you what the norms are, or what the standards are, or what the criteria are for ethical action. Before we dig a little deeper into normative ethics, let's see how all three of these are entangled. You want to call some action wrong. Well, wrong according to what? Say you think that euthanasia is unethical. Well, according to what? According to what theory? Where are the standards coming from? You're able to apply your ethics if you have an ethics. And so normative theory provides what those standards are that you can use to judge an action as being right if it meets that standard, or wrong if it falls short of that standard. So that's this connection, and this one's involved as well, metaethics that is. When you're calling some action right or wrong according to some ethical theory, some ethical normative theory, in the back of your mind, somewhere that you might not even be thinking about, you have an idea about whether that applies to only this case or if it's universal. What does it even mean to call that action wrong? Let's dig deeper into some examples of normative ethical theories and how they are related. Super popular is Jeremy Bentham / John Stuart Mill's idea of utilitarianism, which is all about utility. Utilitarianism is a system of belief about what the standards are for ethical actions that has to do with maximizing pleasure and minimizing pain for the majority of one's moral community. The ends would justify the means. That's one slogan in utilitarianism. The rule is to do what maximizes pleasure for the majority of the moral community. So, of course, there's a lot to unpack here. What's a moral community? What is pleasure? How do you maximize pleasure? Who is the majority? Another example of an ethical normative theory that is super popular to learn about is deontology, which has this root word deon, about duty and obligation. And this comes from Immanuel Kant, and it tells you that the thing you should be concerned about is having the intentions that a reasonable person could will became the universal law. And if you want to learn more about Immanuel Kant's deontology, you should look up the categorical imperative. There's a lot to unpack here, like what's a reasonable person? Moving on, another theory that's a normative ethical theory is egoism, and this has all to do with yourself. And essentially, this one is telling you that the standard for right action is for you to do whatever is pleasurable. Again, a lot to unpack here. Another normative ethical theory is divine command theory. All about the divine, this one tells you that the standards for right actions come from God, and doing whatever God wants or the gods want is the thing that makes your action good or bad. I'll come up here for the last one I'll add on the board. Another example of a normative ethical theory is all about virtue. Coming from Plato and Aristotle, virtue ethics tells you to find the good people. Find the people who are good moral characters, and to do what a person with good character would do. Here are a few examples of some normative ethical theories. Each one of these is telling you a totally different answer to the question of normative ethics. The question of normative ethics is, what are the standards for good actions. And each one of these tells you that the standard is based on a totally different concept. But they do have things in common, even though they also disagree on the criteria for doing the right thing. I'm going to next make a chart and then show you how these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 have some things in common, but also have things in contrast. And before I do that, I want to make it clear that these are the watered down one-liners that have a lot more going on than meets the eye. For example, say you want to subscribe to the ethical normative theory called divine command theory, and you're going to get the answers about what is right from God. Well, which God? If you ask a Muslim or a Christian, they have a totally different set of do's and don'ts to please God. So that's kind of complicated. Say you want to be an egoist and you're going to do whatever is pleasurable. Pleasurable for who? For just yourself or for you and your family? So egoism gets more complicated as well. Say you want to be a deontologist. There's a complication to think about there as well. Patient-centered deontology is all about your rights and what you are able to do, whereas agent-centered deontology is all about what it would be reasonable for you to do as an agent yourself. This normative ethical theory has you choosing between whether you want to come up with a general rule for what maximizes pleasure and then trying to just follow that rule in different instances, or do you need to have utilitarianism coming up every single time you need to act? Also, another complication is this idea of the moral community. How do you choose whose pleasure you're trying to maximize? A lot to unpack there. And lastly, virtue ethics also has more to discover here because there's the eudaimonist versus the Platonic. 5 examples of normative ethical theories are on the board now. What I want to do is show you what they have in common and how they're different. If you have an ethical normative theory that is consequentialist, that would mean that the outcome of the action could justify whatever you had to do. If what you did produced outcome, consequences, something that was good, then whatever you did must have been right. Hedonism. Hedonism has that root word hedon, and it's all about pleasure. If your ethical theory is hedonistic, it means that what is ethical is going to be aligned with what feels good or what pleases somebody. Let's also talk about the scope, about the objectivity. When this ethical theory makes a claim that something is wrong, is it saying that it's wrong always? Help, I'm stuck in a box on your screen. Okay, thanks for listening. So let's see which one of these theories are consequentialist and which ones are hedonistic and which ones are objective. Let's start with virtue ethics. Is virtue ethics all about the consequences of your actions? Yes and no, because it kind of depends on whether you're Platonistic or eudaimonistic. But in general, if you had to give one answer, then the answer would be yes. It's about becoming a good person, but also no, it's about having the intentions that a good person would have. It's about doing the right thing for the right reason, at the right time, to the right extent. And so yes and no, that one's kind of complicated. Utilitarianism is very simple. It is absolutely consequentialist and nothing but. A utilitarian is all about doing whatever it takes to end up with outcomes where you've maximized the pleasure and minimized the pain for the people that you're trying to maximize pleasure for. So that one's an easy one. Deontology is also very easy. It is absolutely not ever a consequentialist theory. No matter what kind of deontology you're looking at, you are always trying to be well-intended, to have a good will, to be a reasonable person, for the sake of your humanness. the principle of your humanity makes it the case that you're obligated to do whatever you need to do. Again, hashtag categorical imperative. So that one's easy as well. And egoism is also easy, definitely consequentialist. You are trying to produce consequences that are pleasurable. Divine command theory, that one's easy. You're trying to produce whatever is pleasurable to God or the gods. So there's how they compare in that column. Let's move to hedonism, which is all about pleasure. Hedon. Virtue ethics, again, that one's complicated because the goal is not pleasure, but a person who's doing the right thing for the right reason is going to also have a pleasurable life. If you want to learn more about how simple and complicated that theory is, check out Aristotle's theory of friendship. There's 3 kinds of friendship, and the friendship based on virtue also happens to be practical and pleasurable. So that one gets kind of complicated. Utilitarianism is absolutely hedonistic. You're trying to maximize pleasure. So it's all about pleasure. Deontology is not about pleasure at all. In fact, Kant says your feelings have nothing to do with morality. What you desire has nothing to do with morality or ethics. So your feelings are totally separate. Egoism is all about pleasure. Divine command theory is all about pleasing God. So those two, again, they line up with that they're both about producing pleasurable outcomes and they're about producing pleasure. Third, objectivity. Virtue ethics, most people would say it is absolutely objective because that mean, the middle path, the golden mean, as Aristotle calls it, is this perfectly balanced middle between 2 vices. If you have just the right amount of courage, that's a virtue, but if you have too little, you're a coward, and if you have too much, then you're rash. But which character traits are the good ones? That could be a little bit subjective. So I'm going to put an X there, but that's controversial to say that virtue ethics is not objective. But if you really stepped back, who are the good people? What is a good character trait? And so maybe that one's complicated as well. For utilitarianism, it is not objective whether some action is good or bad, because once you change the moral community, you're changing whose pleasure you're trying to increase, and therefore you're going to have a different answer about what you're allowed to do, who can be oppressed or used. But at the same time, once you've chosen who the moral community is, then it's fixed. Then there's an objective answer, what the right thing is to do. So that one gets a little complicated as well. Deontology, big picture, it is absolutely objective. It's an absolutist picture. Whoever the reasonable person is, for them to will something to be the universal law means that it would be absolutely objective. What is right for you is right for anybody. What is wrong for you is wrong for anybody. And there's no exceptions at all. That's why it's called the categorical imperative as opposed to a hypothetical imperative. But if you start wondering, who's this reasonable person? And what is a reasonable person's will? Then maybe you can start to get subjective. So again, controversial to say it's not objective. The main picture is that it is. That one's a little bit funny when you really dig down. Is egoism objective? Absolutely not. You can change your mind about what pleases you. The community can change their mind about what pleases the community, and then what is good to do would also change. So absolutely not objective. Divine command theory, on one hand, it is not objective because if you're a Muslim, then you need to keep halal. But if you're Jewish, you need to keep kosher. But if you're Catholic, you need to abide by Lent. All of these religions give us all these different rules on what we're allowed to consume, and each religion says that they know which do's and don'ts please God, and what pleases God is what is the right thing to do. So it's not objective because you have to choose a religion. But once you've once you've chosen the religion that you're going to call true, once you've called God which one it is, then it is objective because your God is right, everybody else's God is wrong. You're right about God, everybody else is wrong about God. And so yes and no. Here are a few ways to compare these normative ethical theories. And again, this is the watered down version. Each one of these could have a 45-minute video.